Puneet, welcome. Welcome to this session of Ecosystem Engage. We like to call it the Not So Daily Show. We'll try and do as many of these as we can. And the whole objective is, as we all sort of stay confined to our homes, well, actually, I guess you can call it home, office, school, gym, everything in one go. We find it all the more important to engage with different people, but and also give the opportunity to the market to get views and perspectives from various leaders who come from different backgrounds and who are involved in shaping the industry to come and share not just their perspectives on the market, but then also to share their own personal experiences in their personal life and on the work front and how it all sort of starts to converge together. So welcome, Puneet, and really, really pleased to have you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. It's always a privilege, and I find my conversations with you always insightful and exciting. So looking forward to this conversation.
Just in terms of, I guess, kicking off, my usual conundrum is how to introduce you, because I think it's very important that I do justice to it. You don't, and I know from the number of sessions I've seen you speak at and the sessions that I've done with you, I think you do yourself disservice in the way you introduce yourself. So I'm going to take the opportunity to introduce you. First of all, as a wonderful human being, I think you bring a whole bunch of positivity in any conversations that you're part of. And I think I've mentioned that before. I think you're really one of those guys. You walk into the room, and I think there's everyone seems to generally have a feel-good factor about it. I think outside of that, you have a fairly busy day job, I'd say, compared to most of us. You run a private equity fund, Solmark. You're also the chairman of a number of your portfolio companies, and these are large growth global companies spread all across the globe. Puneet is also he's a former entrepreneur and operator. He's had some great ticks on his career CV. He's been responsible as a co-founder in some of the biggest tech companies. He's done an exceptional exit as a co-founder of a company that was sold to Genpact, a few years ago. And for a lot of people who don't know, Puneet has also actually owned a bank in the US, which
let's not talk about that.
which I think is just a really cool thing to have. I think that's a great bar story, Puneet, and I think you should share that more often. But beyond that, Puneet does a lot of work around supporting not just the high growth portfolio companies he works with, but mentoring a whole bunch of startups, and for no gain, no personal gain. But then Puneet does also support a number of startups as an individual private investor. So Puneet, I think you bring a really good, well-rounded view, having been an entrepreneur on the operator side, great corporate career, obviously now running a very successful private equity fund. I think we'd love to get into some of the details of how you're dealing with this current situation.
Yeah, thank you very much. First and foremost, that is a very, very gracious introduction. I could just sit back, listen, and I know that if ever I'm feeling down or low, I just have to listen to you talking about myself, and I'm sure I'd get very pumped up. But thank you very much, Amit.
Just before I get into that, just a little bit on your personal side, Puneet. How are you spending your day? I mean, how's that changed for you, and how are you keeping, how are you focused on your own well-being, and just good to know.
Yeah, well, I think. There is, besides the economic aspect of it, like you rightly said, it also translates into a humanitarian crisis right now. So I think there's a lot that we're all concerned about is beyond just the economics in terms of how are we actually taking care of society and what are we doing to actually better society. So my wife enrolled me into meditation classes, and then I'm doing some meditation, taking some meditation classes, and I'm doing my bit of, essentially ensuring that I do get that long walk in, and I'm not completely confined within the four walls of the home. So those are some of the things that are changing. But the other change I must remark upon, Amit, is, and I'm sure you're probably finding that yourself, that because we're working from home, the routine of getting up, getting ready, dressed up, going to work, at work, then saying that, okay, this is essentially a breakfast time, lunch time, evening tea, etc. Those breaks that were there, those tend to disappear when you are actually at home, because you always have the freedom. And not many of my calls are video calls, so many of my calls are actually audio calls. And as a result, I find that when I'm not on video and I'm not forced to actually go get ready, etc., and sit in front of a camera, that my days tend to just morph into each other. And the other thing is that because we are all working from home and we don't have the sense that, hey, Monday to Friday is work day and there is a concept of weekend, that has disappeared, because every day, in a sense, we're at home. So I'm finding that my Mondays are kind of, before I know it, they kind of dissolve into my Saturdays or Sundays. And so the sense of timing has kind of, it's disappeared. Those lines have disappeared, and they've gotten blurred. So that's what's happening. And I'm sure this is probably the case with many, if not most of us here.
Yeah, you're so right, Puneet. If I can just share, from some of the things that I've been doing in the last couple of weeks. I think we're all concerned about not coming out really obese and fat. So now, from speaking to a lot of my friends, and including people like yourself, I get a sense that everyone's really going above and beyond in terms of trying to stay fit and healthy. So I think we'll all come out really buff and fit. Just thought maybe I'll start with a slightly easier one, Puneet, and just get your viewpoint on what your view is as a private equity fund and as a leader. What's happening with companies that are trying to raise capital at this point, or that were trying to raise capital?
I mean, it is a tough time right now to raise capital, no doubt about that. That this is a tough market to raise new capital or capital from new, from new investors. Your existing investors, if they believe in your business model, they will definitely have some dry powder that every one of us keeps, knowing that if I've invested into a business and it's doing well, but it's kind of gotten in a little bit of a hiccup, that it requires additional capital, that you would go back and fund them. But if you are trying to raise money, a brand new money from brand new investors, it is no doubt a tough environment, and you have to be ready for that kind of a situation. That you would have to make that many more calls and meet that many more people. And it's going to be harder because the capital preservation is a very key thing that everybody is right now focusing on. Businesses are focusing on, and the investors like ourselves are also looking at it and saying, hey, I've got to be prudent about where I'm deploying my capital and how I'm deploying my capital. And to some extent, my allegiance and loyalty always goes back to people that I'm invested into, and if they need additional capital, that I'd go back to. Having said that, of course, good ideas, and the definition of good, of course, that's a very relative thing. So I won't get to define it here. But good ideas are certainly, they'll always attract capital. So to me, right now, what is the definition of a good idea is the problem that it's solving, and that's efficiently solving and innovatively solving. So I think those definitions of efficiency, for example, will change. You're already, even before the COVID crisis, you were starting to see some dissonance in, slash and burn, market share at any cost, etc. Those models starting to, get questioned a little bit, etc. I think what situations like these do is they kind of go back, they put the emphasis back on fundamentals. So you will see that there will be required or much more urgency for investors to kind of want to see, hey, that I do have a path to profitability, that this business eventually gets to give me some fundamental, that we are used to. Yeah. And so I think those measurement metrics will start to change, and those businesses that can demonstrate that, I think those will be able to get capital. So my message to entrepreneurs at this point in time is that if your business model was predicated on the old paradigm where you were completely doing slash and burn, market grab at any cost, etc., you may want to rethink in this current environment if you are going for funding right now, no matter what. And I think, again, in a situation like this, you're always trying to balance autonomy versus efficiency, right? So there is the notion that every CEO, every company wants to have autonomy and wants everything, within their span of control, and they don't want to do it. But I think people understand that in a situation like this, getting economies of scale, while has a little bit for them to give up their autonomy, but in the end, economically and otherwise, it's healthy for them and it's healthy for the business. So I think that certainly is something that we're pushing for. We're operationalizing with even more vigor in terms of helping and saying how can we actually, not just in terms of back office efficiencies, etc., but even in terms of sales, in terms of product offerings, in terms of go to market, etc. We're actually having companies sit down together and saying, hey, how can we actually go to market together? What are the things that you're doing? What are the things that we're doing? How can we combine these two and probably go out to a common customer and be able to say, this is a far more effective solution that we can bring to the table, as opposed to the customer going out to two discrete companies or even one company and trying to buy it from them. So all of those things are at play today, and you want to explore each and every one of them, to the extent possible.
Yeah, no, that sounds, that again sounds like a really good approach. Now, Puneet, just before I move on to a couple of other questions, there was something you said to me. Now, as far as I'm concerned, you're my source for that phrase, so I'm going to actually give you that credit on this. And if someone else wants to take claim to it, they can. But what I found really interesting, and I'm actually using it from one of the conversations we had. You said, those that have the money in hand will survive to fight another day. So I wanted to officially attribute my learnings of that saying to you, Puneet. I think that was a very, very simple message, but very strong message.
Yeah, we learned that, Amit. We had, I have one of my partners, senior, who's a little bit senior to me, and I guess he's probably had a few more battle scars than we've had. And in the 2001 .com bust, we learned that lesson. We were right in the heart of Silicon Valley, and there were companies all around us that had these fancy offices that were burning cash like crazy. There were businesses that had business cards that had English on one side and Japanese on the other, because it was cool at that point in time to project, that you you had a Japanese affiliation, even if you didn't have any operations or anything like that. But it was very cool to show that kind of a thing. And people were actually flying to Rio, etc., for their offsite meetings. And this partner of mine, he always said, when he proposed we do an offsite meeting, and his response was, we'll come to the office. We have a fantastic, good, large boardroom, and there's nobody in the office on the weekend. It's nice and quiet. And that way we can go back and sleep in our own beds, and it's comfortable, and we won't be away from our families for too long. And all he was doing was exercising fiscal jurisprudence, which paid off heavy dividends, when the boom turned to bust, that we could ride that out. So we learned that lesson at that point in time. And I'm, so it's something that I believe in. I've seen the payback of that.
Yeah, and who would have known he had the foresight to see that we're all going to end up having these offsites from home. I don't know if you found, Puneet, that as you engage with your colleagues and your portfolio companies and business associates, there's a lot more personal traits and personality coming into these discussions every day, right? And we all seem to be getting a lot more comfortable just sitting around and our t-shirts and shorts, and I even have a bar now, and I have my coffee machine.
I can see that.
Very, very the only thing I miss, I actually even have an exercycle here, so I actually even work out on that. But but at the same time, are you finding that there's so much more convergence of that work and personal life? I don't think it's work-life balance anymore. I think it's work-life convergence.
Yeah, I've always said it's work-life continuum. And people have been talking about work-life balance, and I've said, well, what we have to do is we have to find the equilibrium because it's a work-life continuum. I don't think, with the advent of mobile phones, to me, this thing over here kind of is like my electronic leash. It's a double-edged sword. It allows you freedom. You can be anywhere you want, but at the same time, it kind of, in many ways, locks you down, that you can never be far away from anything because this is right there with you. So I think we have to find that work-life continuum. I think that'll continue to be the case.
In one of the previous conversations that we were having, I think it's public knowledge. I think everyone can go and check your portfolio companies. I mean, one of them is Servion, and they're in the business of contact center solutions. And I was just sharing with you that, that's one area where there is just, and our own analysis shows there's just so much opportunity in that sort of unified comms, collaboration, contact center space, where even some of the largest banks are now looking at moving their contact center staff to work from home, right?
Sure.
And enabling that. So I think the kind of, I think those shifts and those changes will obviously, hopefully also become an opportunity for, some of your companies to demonstrate, I guess, their ability to help their customers.
Indeed. I mean, I think exactly, when you talked about earlier on the question about, what kind of companies will get funding, etc. So you can imagine that companies that are enhancing collaboration, that are allowing people to actually work in an environment like this, because I don't think this is just a one-off situation that has been brought upon. While this may have been brought upon or accentuated by the fact that we're now in the COVID-19 environment, but I think even post this, post the COVID situation, we'll all want to embrace it. We'll all go back. And I know I was talking to a friend of mine who is, he's the president of a very large commodity trading business. And he was telling me last night that, everybody's working from home and they have millions of dollars in real estate in offices across the world. And so they're really rethinking as to why do they need to invest in these millions of dollars of real estate when they feel that there hasn't been a very dramatic perceptible drop in productivity. So it is possible to kind of, downshift from that huge footprint that they have in terms of real estate for offices, that they could do this kind of a thing. So any business that today allows you to be in a collaborative environment will certainly do that. I mean, at Servion, of course, we are doing a lot of work where we're helping companies move to the cloud. And again, that's something that I think, again, is going to be a secular shift, because you're starting to see that those companies, when, work from home got instituted, those businesses that have had most of the data in the cloud, was very easy for them to actually work, move to work from home. But as opposed to those companies that were still in the traditional on-prem environment, they had to do a lot of infrastructural changes for their employees and customers, et cetera, to access that data, when they moved, from on-prem. So I think there are certainly some of those things that will come out of, this whole.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And just on that note, Puneet, last question from a market perspective. I felt compelled to ask you this question, given the visibility that you have across various businesses you're involved in. But I mean, do you have a sense yet in terms of the industries that we feel technology will help overall as we try and come out of this, and hopefully that'll be soon, as we try and come out of this this crisis situation? Just thought I'd try and get your perspective on that.
Listen, I don't know. I don't have enough knowledge about that. And frankly, I think that's something I would say is where companies like yourself, like Ecosystem, come into play, because you want a lot of data on the ground to be able to make that decision. So that decision should not be made anecdotally. That decision should be made empirically. And I think that's where I feel where people will start to rely upon research a lot more, and will want to understand, for people like yourselves, as to what you're finding out as you're actually going out and looking at the landscape, and you're talking to multiple industries and finding out. So I think I'm ill-equipped to answer that question, Amit, and I think, a plug-in for your business, that's something that if I was to, and that's true that in one of my businesses, actually, whilst we have cut a lot of our marketing budget and we have kind of taken some of the other discretionary spend away, but the one spend that we have not taken away is our subscription to the analysts, because we think we need to continue to get intelligence and we need to continue to get robust data of the market coming back to us, so that we're making a data-based decision rather than just purely a gut-based decision. So I think from that perspective, you guys are in the right place, and I think we'll rely a lot upon companies like yourselves to guide us and give us that data so that we're making a database decision.
But Puneet, just before we sign off, and I know that we've talked about how you're dealing with this. In your personal situation, we've talked about your viewpoints as an investor. Obviously, you're leveraging your experience to understand potential implications. And I got a great soundbite for us, which is great. But I also know that you are quite involved in various philanthropic efforts.
Besides, providing food, etc., and those organizations that are very, very much immersed in providing help, at that level. So one of the things that I'm also involved with right now is that I believe that when we come out of this thing, there is a lot of hurt in society. There are a lot of people who unfortunately would have lost their near and dear ones. So society has to rebuild itself, and as society starts to rebuild itself, you've got to kindle hope. And I think artists are probably one of the best hope makers in the world. So one of the things that my wife and I do is that we actually do work with a few art institutions and help them so that they can continue to inspire and provide hope to the world at large. So there is an organization here in Singapore called the Singapore Indian Fine Arts Society that my wife and I are actively involved with. There is an organization in India, for example, which is the Indian Foundation for the Arts that we're involved with. So that's such something that we're doing because artists at the best of times are living on the fringe. And at this point in time, they are just getting impacted like everybody else is getting impacted as well. And I think for the world to kind of gather itself back again, we need that bit of art to come back into our life. So we're helping that as well outside of feeding, a lot of people, which of course we all ought to do.
That's tremendous, Puneet. And if I might separately, I might get a link from you or some details from you separately. And when we do put this out, we might actually put the details there if people want to contribute or be associated with that. But it's been wonderful speaking to you, Puneet. Your energy, your positivity. I think your portfolio companies are fortunate. Now, admittedly, you might have a different stance when you're dealing with them. But I would imagine, given how you engage with the TIE network, which is the TIE network, one of the largest investor entrepreneur networks that you're a trustee on, global trustee on. I think, given how much energy you infuse into that, I would imagine that it's a good respite for your portfolio companies, and I think they're in good hands in terms of getting the right sort of support and guidance. So with that, I wish you well, Puneet. Stay safe, stay well, and best wishes for your family as well. And we look forward to being in touch and speaking to you again soon.
Thank you so much for having me today, and likewise, stay safe, stay healthy, and be well. All the best to you and the family.
Fantastic, Puneet. So thank you, everyone. I've been speaking to Puneet Pushkarna, who runs a very successful private equity fund, tech-focused private equity fund called Solmark, and associated with many other of their portfolio companies as the chairman, but doing a lot in the entrepreneur network, supporting them as well. So thank you, Puneet. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thanks.